President Donald Trump has announced a sweeping 25% tariff on all goods imported from India, effective August 1, 2025. This move marks a dramatic escalation in U.S. economic pressure, threatening the carefully built U.S. India partnership and signaling a hardline shift in American strategy toward Asia. The deadline is absolute, with Trump declaring no extensions, aiming to force India's hand and reshape the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. The world now watches as Prime Minister Modi faces a stark choice: capitulate or risk a trade war that could redefine U.S.-India relations for years to come. Trump's justification centers on what he calls India's unfair trade practices, high tariffs, and complex barriers that hinder American exports. India's average tariff rate is among the world's highest, and U.S. officials argue that non-tariff barriers further disadvantage American businesses. The U.S. trade deficit with India has nearly doubled since Trump's first term, fueling his demand for corrective action. Months of failed negotiations have left the administration convinced that India is unwilling to make meaningful concessions. The new tariff is framed as a last resort, a direct response to India's perceived intransigence. For Trump, the message is clear: the U.S. will act decisively when it feels its economic interests are at stake. The imposition of tariffs extends beyond mere trade disputes. It's a multifaceted strategy with implications that reach far beyond economics. They represent a penalty, a calculated measure in response to India's increasingly close relationship with Russia. This deepening alliance has raised concerns in Washington. Trump explicitly links the tariff directly to India's continued and substantial purchases of Russian energy resources. These purchases are a key factor in the administration's calculus, and critically, its reliance on Russian military hardware, including advanced defense systems. This action is about tying economic policy directly to foreign policy objectives, creating a clear linkage between trade and international relations. The administration is sending a clear warning: neutrality in the Ukraine conflict is no longer a cost-free option for any nation. Economic relationships with the U.S. now increasingly require a demonstration of strategic alignment and shared values. India's continued reliance on Russian defense equipment and its significant energy imports from Russia is perceived as both a strategic vulnerability for India and a vital source of revenue for Moscow's coffers. The imposition of this penalty is specifically designed to pressure India to gradually shift away from its dependence on Russia. The ultimate goal is to encourage a closer alignment with the strategic interests of the U.S. and its allies in the face of global challenges. Trump's move effectively forces India to make a difficult choice between maintaining its long-standing historical ties with Russia and further cultivating its rapidly growing partnership with the United States, a relationship that holds significant economic and strategic potential. The stakes have now escalated beyond simple economic considerations. They are fundamentally geopolitical, impacting global strategy and international relations. India's dependence on Russian oil is a critical factor in its foreign policy decisions. The nation relies heavily on energy imports to fuel its growing economy and meet the demands of its large population. Currently, about 35% of its oil imports come from Russia, a significant portion that highlights the depth of this reliance. This dependence has grown substantially in recent years. This makes a sudden pivot away from Moscow nearly impossible, at least in the short term. Diversifying energy sources is a complex and time-consuming process. Furthermore, decades of military and diplomatic cooperation between India and Russia have created strong bonds. These ties have cemented Russia as a key partner, particularly in defense and security matters, making any shift in allegiance a delicate matter. Adding to this complexity, India's long-standing policy of strategic autonomy firmly resists alignment with any single bloc, preferring to maintain independent relationships with various global powers. However, Trump's tariffs challenged this doctrine, creating a difficult situation for India. This forced India to carefully weigh the potential economic pain of U.S. penalties and trade restrictions against the risks of abandoning long-standing Russian ties, a decision that could have significant geopolitical consequences. The decision is fraught, because giving in to U.S. demands could threaten India's energy security, potentially disrupting its economic growth, while defiance risks a damaging trade war with the United States, a key economic partner. The U.S. has long seen India as a crucial counterweight to China's growing influence in the region, but these tariffs and trade disputes could inadvertently undermine that very strategy, pushing India away. A weakened or alienated India may, as a result, look to alternative alliances and partnerships to secure its interests. This includes the possibility of forging closer ties with China and Russia, potentially reshaping the geopolitical landscape. In this complex web of international relations, the balancing act for India has never been more precarious, requiring careful navigation to safeguard its interests and maintain its strategic autonomy. The imposition of tariffs marks a volatile new era, signaling a significant shift in the landscape of international commerce. These tariffs are not merely economic tools, they represent a departure from established norms and a move towards more protectionist policies. In global trade, a system that has long been predicated on cooperation and mutual benefit. This is a world where economic disputes are increasingly inseparable from geopolitical rivalries, blurring the lines between trade negotiations and strategic positioning on the world stage. The Trump administration's willingness to pressure even close partners, allies who have historically enjoyed preferential treatment, signals the end of strategic ambiguity, a clear indication that the old rules of engagement no longer apply. Nations must now pick sides, aligning themselves with specific economic and political blocs in a rapidly fragmenting world order. The U.S. India partnership, once hailed as vital for regional stability and economic growth, faces its toughest test yet, as disagreements over trade threaten to undermine years of diplomatic efforts. A trade war could unravel years of progress, damaging economic ties and creating lasting resentment between the two nations. This could breed mistrust and potentially push India toward rival blocs like BRICS, seeking alternative partnerships to safeguard its economic interests. Rather than isolating Russia, as intended by some policies, the policy risks uniting America's competitors, forging a powerful coalition of nations opposed to U.S. dominance. This could lead to a significant shift in the global balance of power, reshaping international alliances and challenging the existing world order. This is more than a trade dispute. It's a fundamental clash of ideologies and strategic interests. It's a sign of a world where economic nationalism and power politics rule, where the pursuit of national interests trumps international cooperation. As the August 1st deadline looms, the pressure mounts on both sides to find a resolution. The world waits to see if compromise is possible, if cooler heads will prevail, and a mutually beneficial agreement can be reached, or if a major rift is inevitable, leading to further fragmentation of the global economy and increased geopolitical instability. The outcome will shape not just U.S.-India relations, determining the future trajectory of their partnership, but the future of the global order, influencing the balance of power and the effectiveness of international institutions.